Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Some big news right out of the gate, some good stuff. Excited about the fact that the January 6th Commission has subpoenaed retired Colonel Phil Waldron. You know, the guy who had the treason PowerPoint? Yeah, actually going to subpoena him. Interesting to see what he'll do. Will he come in, plead the fifth, or will he, go full tilt with his belief? This is the thing that's really interesting to me at this moment. Because if these people believed that they were right, if they believed that they were doing the right thing and they were within the bounds of the law to do, they would come out and defend it and say, yes, it was perfectly reasonable for us to do this, and this is what we did, and then we're proud of this. I'm going to be interested to see if Waldron is going to be that guy. Just recently he was in Louisiana peddling this idea that, their system is, just riddled with fraud and abuse and all kinds of dead people voting and all kinds of stuff. Even though what we see is the argument doesn't play out in reality. In fact, the AP just did a study of the 2020 election, and what they came to is there might be like 500 questionable ballots in a country of how many millions of votes? Certainly not enough to sway the election. But I find it interesting at how they're running away from what they did. You would think that they would be proud of what they did. They're patriots, remember? I will be interested to see if he actually testifies or pleads the fifth or does the other thing and chooses to be held in contempt. This is why we play the game. But here's the thing: the people that we have found that have committed voter fraud tend to be the people claiming that the system is broken and rigged, and their voter fraud is the justification for the thought that they believe there's voter fraud. It's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy thing. There's voter fraud out there because I'm committing it. So there is that. Also, good news, great news on this front, and I'm thrilled with this one. A federal judge today threw out the $4.5 billion settlement with the Sackler family. The Sackler family, the OxyContin people, Purdue Pharma, what the bankruptcy judge had gone through and what they had figured out at the lower court level, the bankruptcy court level, is a $4.5 billion settlement, and it would save the Sackler family from being sued. Well, the U.S. district judge said, no, I don't think so. I don't think you get to shield the family of their billions from the things that their company did, especially given the fact that some of the stuff we saw was really egregious. Now, it wasn't their company that said, we're going to keep pushing them out the door like Doritos. If they keep eating them, we'll keep making them. But everybody in the industry had to know their product was addictive and kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I'm glad this. Because ultimately, we keep letting our corporate criminals get away with their crimes and never really ever hold them accountable. Maybe a little slap on the wrist. And $4.5 billion sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about the size of this company and the wealth of this family, sorry, not enough. I personally think they should be wiped out. They should be sued out of existence. The company should be gone, and you should take the patent for that drug and make it a generic, because we still need some painkiller type drugs for some people, just not on every shelf. You look at that story coming out of West Virginia where, there are just, tens of thousands of doses of this stuff in towns of a couple hundred people. Crazy. So I am thrilled to see this. What they say is, since 1999, and this is the CDC's number, more than 500,000 people have died because of opioid overdoses. Somebody's got to be held accountable, especially when this wasn't an accident. This was done on purpose. Also, the Biden administration released a plan today to attempt to strengthen the U.S. trucking industry and the workforce. They're going to try and reduce some of the barriers for people to get commercial driver's license. They're going to continue their veteran outreach because we want veterans to get jobs and expand apprenticeship programs, which I'm all in favor of, have been in for a very long time, been a fan of for a very long time. I learned the old-fashioned way. Hey, kid, do you know how to drive? Oh, yeah, sure I did. Oh, here are the keys. Good luck. And you drove around in the yard and you had old-timers, take you under your wing. Now it's like you go to a 2-week class and bang. I'm not sure which barriers we're talking about, but I hope there's some parameters in place to make sure we don't get a bunch of kids, because I guess they want to lower the age down to 18. Very worried about that. But if this helps alleviate some of the strain on the industry, I'm okay with it. My problem is none of this is going to do anything about the conditions of the job. None of this is going to do anything but the fact that you can work 80 hours a week and still not make a living. That a problem for me. But we'll see where this plays out. So for me, those were the big stories on the national level. On an important level, the folks over at EPI, the Economic Policy Institute, came out with a piece that not new. This is one of those things. It's not new. Something I've been saying for decades now. But it's good to see them actually write it out and put it down in black and white in a very academic way. Because as they point out, unions aren't just good for workers, they're good for communities, they're good for democracy. I've said for years, workers who have a voice on the job generally demand that same voice in their communities, that same voice in their government. You have active, empowered, engaged workers. You have active, engaged, empowered citizens. And they generally want the right things. A lot of what the right does, they try and empower people with fear. And we've seen this in the last couple of elections. It's always whatever the fear du jour is, whatever outrage candy they can shovel down people's throats is where they push. Instead of how do we make people's lives better? How do we make our communities better? How do we do better things to make lives better? It's all about tearing us apart. And this is where, I think this report that they've put out is important. It's important especially for people who have never been a part of a union or know nothing about it and have only been fed the outrage candy. I've only been fed the talking points from the Center for Union Facts people, which are funded by some of the biggest union busters in the country. Reality check. You have some strength, some power at work, you're going to demand that everywhere else. It just makes sense. And they go through and they talk about the fact that states with higher union density rates generally have higher minimum wage laws, have higher incomes, medium incomes for people, have better returns on their policies for unemployment, workers' compensation, all of those things that make workers' lives better. Higher rates of people having health insurance, higher rates of people having retirement plans. The better things that we have demanded over the years, states with higher union density rates have the better stuff. And that's because they demand it. They demand it in the workplace, and they demand it in their rules, in their policy, in their laws, of the politicians that stand for them, both usually on the right and the left. There was a time, and I still remember it, where there were some pro-labor Republicans. They wouldn't go after prevailing wage laws because they understood prevailing wage is how we kept local workforce, how we maintained a local construction trade, how people were able to build the local buildings without having a transient workforce who comes through, throws up a shoddy building, and boom, is out the door the next day, only to leave behind tons of problems. And I've said it before. I'll say it again. If you're putting a roof on my kid's school, I want your kid sitting next to my kid. This way you have some stake in that roof going, hey, I don't think I want that thing to collapse on your kid's head because my kid's sitting next to him. Seems like common sense. And we've seen this stuff. Look, the studies are there. And this is why I think what EPI does is so important. By laying all this stuff out in a very academic way, they explain, down the line why we have to have a high union density, why a voice on the job is important. And, prevailing wage laws being one of those things. Most people hear, what do you mean prevailing wage laws? No idea. In fact, I had someone, I've had a bunch of people over the years tell me what it is, and they go, no, that's the union wage. And I'm going, no, it's not. Oh, it's the average wage. And no, it's not that either. It's the wage most often paid. And where the fallacy of the union wage comes is because the unions report their wages, because they're proud of the fact that they negotiate the highest wages in an industry. They're proud of the fact that they fight for and win good contracts for their members. They're proud of the fact that their employees, their members, are the best trained, most efficient, most productive workers in the industry. That's reality. And the reason that they're still around, especially when you look at the fact that most of the construction industry has been all fly-by-night independent contractors who, I don't know if they know which end of the hammer is which, but they're cheap. The reason the union contractors are still around, their employees are good. The union members are well-trained. And it's because of that prevailing wage that allows those people to compete. And we've seen it in states that have done away with prevailing wage laws. Almost immediately, you lose those people because they're of sufficient skill to go somewhere else, do something else, and leave the industry. And what you end up with is higher costs, shoddy work, and fly-by-night things. So for me, smart to have a local construction trade. And prevailing wage and high union density, a huge part of that. Also, what we know is in those states that have higher union density, you have less people who are uninsured. And why is that? Well, because those states actually expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Most of those states have paid sick leave laws, have family leave laws, have all kinds of things to help families. Because look, this has always been the thing that infuriates me about right-wing commentators. They say, well, union members are only about themselves. They're a special interest, only concerned about themselves. And it's nowhere remotely true, because it's the unions who are usually pushing for a higher minimum wage. None of their members earn minimum wage. They push for that because it's the right thing to do. They want a strong social safety net so that no workers fall behind. You cannot have a class of, a massive divide in the workforce of haves and have-nots, which is what unions do very effectively to try and close. So nothing in this report, and I highly suggest taking a look at it. It's well worth the 20-minute read because they do lay this stuff out. We'll get links out on social media how you can check out the Economic Policy Institute's most recent piece. But on the healthcare, on the retirement side, on all of that, the standards are higher. Unemployment insurance, the payout rates are higher. The number of people who are out of work getting it are higher. There's just more access to it, less barriers. And what we've seen in states with very low union density rates, think South Carolina, think Mississippi, think Florida, think a lot of these states that have lower rates. They have, I think, what did Florida go to a 12-week unemployment from 26? There were some that went to 6 weeks of unemployment. It's all about making desperate workers take the crummiest jobs they can get. Whereas in high-density states, you're at 26 weeks, and the reimbursement rates are higher. This way, it gives you the opportunity to hold out a little bit longer, just a little bit, in a way that you can hold out for a better job. So, some of the other numbers, median income much higher in high union density states. The number they threw out in high union density states, the median annual income over almost $76,000, whereas in the low density states, $63,000. So you're looking at almost $14,000, almost $13,000 difference, which is massive. And, they didn't even get into the part about safe working conditions. They didn't get into the part of the at-will employment stuff. They didn't get into any of that. This was purely the economic, the access to health care, the access to retirement security, the stability that comes with it. They didn't get into any of the other stuff. And look, all of this stuff is important. All of this stuff is stuff we should all be fighting for. Now, for me, it's a great report. There aren't enough states in the high range anymore. There aren't enough people in the unions in those high states. You go back 20, 30 years ago when I first started working, the country had over almost 25% union density. We're down to, in the private sector, about 6.4%. And even in this environment, these numbers are still true. Even in this environment, as badly as labor has been battered and beaten and divided and attacked, these numbers are still true. And that's where, I have some hope. I have hope that this generation that's coming up right now is looking at their parents and going, hey, you guys have struggled way too hard to make a living. Both parents, working their, fingers to the bone, just trying to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. And this generation's going, we're not going to take it. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to demand better because, well, we can. And that's the exciting thing about the future of what is possible. Where I keep coming back to is the labor movement is the place where we can make lots of changes in society and quickly. Direct action, direct change. You go through the political process. It could take years. Look, we can't get the Build Back Better plan passed through, which is simply saying, hey, we want families with kids to be able to make sure that they get a couple of bucks a month to make sure that there's food on the table, roof on the head, that kind of stuff. A little bit of a cushion. Now, you can argue, but Rick, those are just subsidies for low-wage employers. Yeah, it is, but we're helping families. We build up that union density. We get that cushion for low-wage workers by raising their wages. But for right now, we can't even agree on that. We can't agree on the stuff that we already agree on. How screwed up is that? So for me, I look at this report, lots of stuff in it that, we already know, but it's important to remember. It's important to not just remember, but to push the Democratic Party to get some major labor law reform passed, because we desperately need it. Desperately. And if we can do that, maybe we have a chance at saving our democracy. Maybe by empowering workers in the workplace, we're going to empower them in community to save our democracy and not rip it to shreds. Just my thought. Would love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. When we come back and talk a little bit about the Build Back Better plan, the infrastructure bill that got passed through, how that's going to help the jobs created, what it's going to do for the economy, all of that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day an explosion rocked Fairmont Coal Company's number 6 and number 8 coal mines in Monaga, West Virginia, killing 367 miners. Newspaper reports estimated the number of dead to be as high as 500. It is considered the worst mine disaster in the history of the United States. Most miners were killed instantly, as the explosion destroyed the mine entrance and its ventilation system. Those not killed instantly suffocated from poisonous gas. Earth tremors were felt 8 miles away. The force of the explosion buckled pavement, collapsed buildings, and derailed streetcars. More than 3,200 miners had died in 1907. There were 3 more mine disasters before the end of the year. The last month became known as Black December. In January, a coroner's jury verdict ruled that a blowout shot ignited coal dust and made a number of recommendations for safer practices. But David McIntyre tells a different story in his history of the disaster. He argues that the tipple had a design flaw that led to occasional coal car derailments as they exited the mine. And on this day, there had been a derailment with coal cars crashing at the bottom of the shaft and taking out the electrical and ventilation systems with it, igniting the coal dust in the process. The disaster generated a surge in demands for greater mine safety, leading to the creation of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. The Bureau could conduct research and safety training, but were powerless to conduct inspections or safety enforcement. Miners would continue to fight for the better part of the century for safety regulations and enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news today, and I'm happy with this announcement. The Biden administration came out today and said they're going to jumpstart efforts to remove all of the lead pipe in this country. And look, this is something I've been talking about for years. We need massive investment in our underground infrastructure. Where I'm at, not too far from here in Harrisburg, the Pennsylvania state capital. It's like sinkhole capital of the world. Buses, tractors, all kind of stuff seem to be getting swallowed up because the pipes under the ground are like 100, 125 years old. We haven't done the investment. Talked about it, talked a lot about it, but never seemed to get anything done. So I'm thrilled by the fact that the Biden administration is saying, hey, we're going to make water clean again. Can we put that on a bumper sticker? Can that be like one of those MAGA things? Make water clean again? Anyway, here to share some thoughts on how we do just that. I've asked Tim Burga to come talk with us. Tim is the president of the Ohio Afl-Cio. Tim, thanks for taking some time for us.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
So I'm looking at this announcement, and I think this is great. I know in our backyard we desperately need it. I know in places like Allentown, places like Cleveland, Milwaukee, Flint, desperately need this kind of investment, if not just to help save our children, but to create some jobs.
Well, after decades of promising that we're going to do something about our nation's infrastructure, and in particular, as you pointed out, getting rid of the lead water pipes and putting in new pipes and safe drinking water, the day's finally here. And this massive investment with the infrastructure bill that President Biden led brings 15 million new jobs into the country, 60,000 new jobs into Ohio. And as you indicated, $1.4 billion just into Ohio to remove lead pipes and to make our drinking water safe. And we think it's a win for, of course, all families in Ohio and all working people in Ohio. And it's a new day, and we're really happy to be a part of it.
No, and it's desperately needed. And as I've been saying, this is kind of a reset of our economy and the kind of jobs that have been created. This is kind of a statement that we're going to have people who build things again. And you talk about the 15 million infrastructure jobs, being an economic shot in the arm, which is what this study from Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce has come out with. 15 million jobs over 10 years. That's a pretty big deal, especially when you look at the fact that most of those jobs, because prevailing wage is still in the law, those are going to be good wage, good family sustaining jobs with health care and retirement security. This is the way forward.
There's no question it's the way forward. And especially as you look back over this pandemic, it's working people and trade unionists that have served, we've sacrificed, we've healed, we've honored the country we love, the country unions built. And what we've asked in return is to invest in us. And I believe that we're in a renaissance now, a new period here where we're going to start to put working people first, an economy that works for us. And the first thing we'd asked for was the American Recovery Plan to get us a blueprint of out of this economic crisis and fund the vaccines. And then the next piece we asked for was, after decades of broken promises, to usher in a new era of this infrastructure bill. And as you indicated, 15 million new jobs. And these are good union jobs that can't be outsourced with domestic materials. And in Ohio, what that means is $11 billion at a minimum, not including any grants that we might be getting, which there's a lot of talk about potential grants for transportation and other things here. But we're talking, $9.6 million for roads and bridges in Ohio, $1.2 million to improve public transit. Our airports, $250 million, $140 million to expand broadband and the charging networks in Ohio for the electric vehicles. And as you indicated, the water. So these are down payments on President Biden's promise to be the most pro-union, pro-worker president in our lifetime. And we want to continue to build upon it.
Now, one of the things this study from Georgetown pointed out is that this is going to kind of remake our economy and be kind of a, what they say, temporarily reinvigorate the blue-collar workforce. Because for the last couple of decades, working class males have been taking it on the chin as we've lost manufacturing, we've lost steel jobs, we've lost a lot of those blue collar jobs to outsourcing and all of that. This is an opportunity to reclaim some of that. And he's also talking about, having Buy American provisions right there front and center. So the steel we use on those bridges going to be made right here at home. The concrete, all of the things that we're going to use. Hopefully we're going to create jobs here at home with that as well. And I think that's something we've desperately needed to do over the last couple of decades.
You're right. Of these 15 million jobs that Georgetown University study is projecting across the country, 560,000 jobs in all, 85% of these jobs are not going to require a 4-year degree. So these are going to be our pipe fitters, and these are going to be our electricians, and these are going to be our communication workers and our transit workers. And as you indicated, it's going to be a massive investment into the people who do the work in this country and make our economy go. And that investment is going to give back to our overall economy, and it's going to help Main Street businesses all over the country as well. And there's a reason why when you see something where the Afl-Cio and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce both support it, it's good for the worker and for the business community, and that makes it good for the economy. So we're ready to do our part, as we always do, roll up our sleeves, get to work, and get the job done.
Yeah, you don't often see that marriage. You don't often see that coupling happen. But when it can, this is a good thing. Now, one of the things that's of a concern, and I've asked a lot of my building trades friends, are we able to do this? I mean, this is a massive investment. Do we have the manpower? Do we have the brain power? Do we have the skilled workers to be able to do this? And how long, if we don't, how long is it going to take to ramp up these apprenticeship programs, which my building trades friends do better than anyone? How long is it going to take? Or do you think we're capable of taking this on right now?
Yeah, we're going to get there. Of course, a lot of this money is to expand existing projects, and then there's so much for new work that needs to be done to rebuild the country. We've been preaching for a long time now to be putting students even in the elementary level and then into the high school K through 12 into the trades and pre-apprenticeship. And I was at visited a school in New Lexington, Perry County, rural Ohio, and we've got third graders welding, at the school system down in Perry County to get ready for all the jobs that are going to be happening. And the building trades, they know what they're doing. It's a pipeline, and what we've always known in this country, if you give somebody a good job with good pay and good benefits and an interest in their safety on the job, people are going to gravitate towards it. And there's nobody, no industry, no unions better prepared to do this work and to have a pipeline full of workers to get those benches filled and get the job done than the building trades. And we know we're going to make that happen.
No, I've said for years, the reason we're seeing the craziness we see politically is because a lot of the folks that I know who are the angriest are the ones who have been left behind by this economy. They come from small towns where the only manufacturing facilities long left, and there's nothing behind to take up the slack. I say you give people, as you pointed out, good jobs with good retirement, good health benefits, and a future and opportunity. I think a lot of this insanity, I think a lot of it calms down. I think and I've been saying for years, if we give people the path to join and form unions and get good work, I think a lot of our problems get solved in the simplest of ways in the workplace.
Well, we've been talking for over 4 decades, as you know, about the deindustrialization of this country and what it's meant to our blue collar workforce, right? And what it's meant to our ability to really take care of ourselves. And we're seeing that with the problems with the supply lines and the like. And we've been talking about that for so long. So we're going to insource our work. We're going to focus on this infrastructure work. We're going to focus on advanced manufacturing and reinstituting manufacturing in this country again. We're going to have the energy jobs that the ones that are here and the new energy jobs, especially in those hard-hit coal-affected communities and Appalachia and the Ohio River Valley. And we're going to lead the way with that renaissance as well.
No, it's something we desperately need to do. Now, just to turn the corner a little bit, a moment ago you said, Joe Biden's been, a good president for union workers. I've said he's probably the most pro-union president in my lifetime. I like the rhetoric. I like the fact that he's come out and made statements, around what was going on in Alabama with Amazon. He's come out and made statements against permanently replacing striking workers at Kellogg's. It's all great that he's come out and made these statements, but we ultimately need to pass some major comprehensive labor law reform. And some of that is in the Build Back Better plan, but ultimately it's the PRO Act that needs to get passed. But yet here we're in this moment where, 50-50, we ain't going to get that. How do you see a path forward?
Well, we're going to keep fighting till we get it. But if you look at what's happened over the last year with President Biden, there's 4 areas that we focus on. One is executive orders. And the president has been very bullish and living up to his promises on taking care of working people with his executive orders. When you look at his appointments, in particular to places like the National Labor Relations Board and areas focusing on wage and hour law. And then you look at bills passed or proposed, which is critical. Again, the American Recovery Plan, the Build Back, the infrastructure bill, critical. But we also have to get the Build Back Better Act. We have to get the PRO Act. We need to focus on making some sense out of our voting laws here and trying to stop this gerrymandering of our districts and the taking away of voter rights. And then his statements and actions, as you'd indicated, his support for the striking mine workers down in Alabama, his support for the Kellogg's workers. So again, after the first year, I can tell you he's been the most pro-union president in my lifetime. And again, these are all down payments on things to turn this country around and call in a transformative new America, one that puts working people first. We've got a lot of work to do, as you indicated, and we're not going to let up until we get it done.
Does this help with union members? Does this help with them voting? I mean, the fact that he has delivered on his promises, the fact that he has been the most pro-union and is actually trying to do more than anyone, especially the former guy. Do you see this as helping with union households?
It's harder than ever to, get folks to get out of their silos that they're in. And so many Americans now just want to be confirmed with their points of view, not informed. And social media has certainly fed into that. So it's harder than ever. Organized labor still does the best job that there is because of our structure and our networks. But folks are in camps, you know that. And every day that goes by, though, if people look at how are their lives going, how are they doing, how are their children doing, what are their opportunities, what's the future look like, how do I feel about the direction of the country, every day that goes by and the jobs that are being created, how the market's doing, how Main Street businesses are doing, that all makes a big difference and a huge difference. And then organized labor will continue to do our part to talk to our members at the workplace, talk to them at the doorstep, on the phones, through mail, and just, be honest and tell the truth. Yep. And where things are working, we'll be honest, and where they're not, we won't. And we've always done that, and we're going to continue to do that. But it is more difficult than ever before because of there's so many different ways now to get your information, and folks tend to, gravitate towards areas where they're just being, confirmed things that maybe they think will make their lives better, or things that they want to hear, but aren't necessarily true. So we're just going to be honest, tell the facts, tell it like it is, call balls and strikes, and the membership will listen as long as things are working.
Right. I hope you're calling better balls and strikes than John Roberts. I just got to throw that out there. But here's the thing. I'm hoping that we move in the right direction, because ultimately labor is about wages, hours, conditions, about making lives better. I've been pushing this idea of union job, better life. That's the message for me. But I got to get your thought on this, and this is the last line of questioning I've got for you, because I'm looking at this horrible, this tragedy over the weekend that went from Arkansas through Kentucky and just leveled communities. And we keep hearing the misery porn on TV of people losing their lives. But I haven't heard enough about what happened at that Amazon facility were a number of workers that lost their lives. This Mayfield Consumer Products, this candle making place, where in both places you've got employers saying, hey, you can't go home. You can't have your phone with you. You can't communicate with the outside world. They basically set these people up in ways that made their lives much more dangerous and their families. And I'm not hearing people being as outraged as I think they should be. Or am I missing something here?
Well, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts and our support goes out to the families that have been devastated. I know that in speaking to my president in Kentucky, Bill Londrigan, they were working with United Way with that disaster relief fund down there, and we've encouraged folks to contribute to that to help these people get back up and rebuild. I think you're going to be hearing more about what you're talking about. And, one thing for sure is if you have a union, you have a say at work. You have a say about your safety conditions, your working hours. And that's the best way to protect yourself at work, is to have a collective bargaining agreement where you have a seat at the table and you're talking about these things in advance. For sure, you can't predict everything that's going to come, but I think you're going to be hearing more about what's happened there, and we'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, we need to support the families that have been hit hard.
Yeah, we better hear more about this, because another big issue in this whole scenario, especially at the Amazon place, is most of the people who were in that facility were independent contractors who weren't even employees. And the stories that I'm hearing in the few places that you can find information is that they weren't even tracked. They didn't even know how many people were in the building, and there was no way no training on how to get out. It was a disaster waiting to happen from the beginning, and it cost people their lives.
Well, the misclassification of employees has been a major problem for a long time now, and we've got to get to the bottom of it. We've got to fix it, frankly, because you've got employers that really are skirting their obligations, and as a result, you run into a situation where when you run into a disaster like this, you're not as protected as what you need to be. And that's a shame. And again, I think we're going to be hearing more about what's happened in these facilities.
Well, we better. Tim, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and talk with us again, especially as we start moving into getting some of those pipes replaced and those jobs created, and those families getting decent wages and conditions and all of that. I appreciate the time, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Good stuff. Tim Burga, president of the Ohio Afl-Cio. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1951. That was the day New York City was struck by the Great Bagel Famine. 300 members across 32 bakeries of the Bagel Bakers of America Local 338 walked off the job over wages and working conditions. Morris Siegel, business agent for the local, stated that the Bakers Association had been lax in living up to the welfare fund payments and sanitary provisions of the contract. The Bagel Bakers produced 1.2 million bagels weekly for New York City consumers. The Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle noted, quote, "The only ones welcoming this respite are the salmon. Diners, delicatessens, and Teamster delivery drivers were all rocked by the strike, which lasted for 6 weeks. The two sides were so deadlocked that a mediator who had effectively settled a smoked salmon dispute 3 years earlier was brought in to help settle the conflict. The Bagel Bakers won a $3 a day wage increase and were ready to return to work. But the Teamsters would not begin deliveries until they were paid for lost wages due to the lack of deliveries made during the strike. The Bagel Bakers would engage in job actions effectively over the course of the next 15 years until they, too, suffered the fate of many an industrial worker, that of automation. Their labor would eventually be replaced by labor-saving bagel-making machines by the late 1960s.
The Bagel Bakers Local 338 was a union that was based in New York State. And they set the minimum wages of the Yiddish bagel bakeries and controlled all of the stages from the flour sack to the plate. But like the railroad did to the canal
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said at the beginning, this retired Colonel Phil Waldron, Mr. PowerPoint. Look, I'm really hoping that Mr. PowerPoint comes out because he was so confident in his plan that he wrote it out on a PowerPoint and presented it to everyone. I hope he is so confident that he was right that he comes out and says, look, I did this. I was right. I'm still right. And then testifies. Will he do that? No. But, we'll see. And here to share some thoughts on, our caucus of treasons and traitors. And, of course, Mr. PowerPoint himself. There's got to be a joke in there somewhere. I've asked our good friend Steve Hofstetter to come talk with us. Steve is a comedian, my YouTube addiction, and a lot of other people. If you don't know him, you've got to seek this stuff out. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
I appreciate it. If you want jokes about PowerPoint, man, I have jokes about PowerPoint, man. And I just heard about this a second ago. But I truly believe that the way this happened was he just pitched the idea of a PowerPoint, and Trump was so excited by the word power that he was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, he doesn't even know what the software is. I think they probably had an Excel. He was excited about that as well. They tried to pitch Word, but he's like, no, I'm afraid of those. Yeah. So there was nothing done in Word. Just...
Now, are you surprised, kind of like I am, that because I am a little surprised that how brazen they are, to use commercial software that can be traced and shared and all of this stuff, that they were just really right up front, that they were okay with the treason they were moving forward on.
I'm not surprised at all, and here's why. Rick, are you familiar with the Roger Clemens steroid scandal?
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah, and you know that he paid for them with a check, right?
Yes.
And the reason is because people who do those things don't think they're doing anything wrong. And so they weren't hiding because they thought they were about to win. They thought that this was going to work. They thought that they would overturn all the results. They thought they were going to install him as president/dictator. And they thought everything was going to be fine. They thought that this PowerPoint was going to be printed out and framed. And turns out, no.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is I have friends who during the Obama years were walking around with the pocket constitutions, yelling about, they were all Tea Party people and, you're destroying democracy. Yet I can't find one of them today, not a peep out of one of them, when you actually had someone who was trying to overthrow an election and really trash the Constitution. I find it ironic.
Well, it doesn't count when it's their guy. It's the same way that, like, when a Democrat is president, and gas prices go down, it's market forces. But when they go up, it's because of the Democratic president.
Yeah.
When a Republican is in charge and gas prices go up, well, that's market forces. But when they go down, it's because of the Republican president.
Well, isn't there a switch in the Oval Office that raises the gas prices automatically? Isn't that there?
Yeah. The thing that amazes me the most about all of that is that, do they not understand there are other countries also? Like people complaining about inflation, they're like, American inflation's out of control. It's like, have you seen Europe?
No, Steve. American exceptionalism. We're better than that, Steve. We're exceptional. That stuff doesn't apply to us.
I think we've become exceptional at a couple of things. But to go back to the idea of, they said one thing under Obama and a different thing with Trump. It's the same way that they talk about how, they're the party of small government, and then they want to decide what a third grader learns in every school across America. It's cognitive dissonance. That's all it is. It is the unwillingness to accept that this concept is wrong, because if this concept is wrong, then someone who believed in it is wrong, and they believed in it, so then therefore they're wrong, and they're unable to do that.
No, it's interesting. Now, you're a smart guy. You actually have an actual history degree from an actual real university. It's not like you got some Rumble videos and a certificate from Trump U.
Don't tell my Facebook commenters that, though. According to them, I'm an idiot.
But, you look at the situation we're in, and, a lot of this stuff we've seen throughout history. Do you have any hope that we're going to get out of this anytime soon, or does it get worse from this point forward? I'm curious your thought.
I do have hope. I don't know if it's going to get worse before it gets better, but the demographics are shifting. But also, in one generation, Germany went from fascists to pacifists. Like, in one generation, there is a remarkable amount that can change very, very quickly. The thing that concerns me the most is how many of our institutions have been eroded. The faith in institutions that we need to exist have been eroded. How there are people who will not accept any source as fact, everything's biased. Google's biased. Okay, tell me which search engine you'll use then. Well, I don't know any others. It's like, okay. I mean, you can't keep moving the goalposts, and that genuinely scares me. And I'm also genuinely scared just at public health, because there are so many people who are anti-COVID vaccine that worries me that in the next couple of years, they're going to be anti-everything vaccine, and then we're all going to die.
Couple years, no. Not couple years. It's starting now.
Yeah, that part, it just takes a couple years to have effect, but that part scares me for sure. But the reality is I'm an optimist, and I do think that if the Democratic Party or the individual candidates or whoever the hell we need to do it can stop being cowards and actually do something, and actually, while you still have power for the next year, you have a year left, just a year. Do something.
Yeah, no.
And when I say do something, I don't mean executive orders. I don't mean shove things down people's throats. I mean, look at the courts. Look at the fact that the Supreme Court, the reason 9 was not a coincidence. 9 was because that's how many federal courts there were. And now we have, 24? And so we need more judges. And the idea of being like, oh, well, it's tradition. For how long? The court's been changed several times. So we need to actually stop being cowards and do something. Yeah, and if that happens, then I have confidence.
Then I hope. But we still got Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, and I don't know what planet they're from, because
they're from the planet Billions.
This is true, but it's hard to be a comedian in this day, or is it easy? I mean, I see you all over the country. You're probably one of the hardest working people that I've seen. You're everywhere. And you take on all comers. Is it getting harder to deal with the hecklers and the people giving you a hard time, or is it the same as it always was?
I think it's the same as it always was. I mean, in a way, their points are getting dumber, so they're easier to refute. Like it's not, but also, I mean, that's something that's always been the case. The person who thinks that they can yell out and correct a comedian, the person who gets a couple of drinks in them and then thinks, oh, I'm going to win. That person doesn't understand nuance. I had one that I posted the other day where some guy yelled out about Biden raising gas prices. And it was just so easy to ask him facts and have him not know anything else except that one talking point. So as long as you are educated, as long as you know what you're talking about, it's pretty easy to shoot down I mean, they only have 8 things that they say. You just got to learn what the 8 of them are.
So
you're caught up.
Are you getting any "Let's Go Brandons" or the sign I saw today, Braden? Are you getting any "Let's Go Braden"?
Oh, "Let's Go Braden." That's hilarious. I haven't gotten one at a show, but I get them online all the time. And my favorite thing to do is just say, "Oh, say what you mean." Are you rooting for someone named Brandon, or is this code? If it's code, please tell us what you mean, because then they say it and then they get kicked off Facebook, which is fun.
There you go. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Steve Hofstetter, comedian, My YouTube Addiction. I understand you're in New York City right now, about ready to do another comedy special, which I hope soon will be available for people to get into. Tell me a little bit what you're doing.
So I'm actually filming the comedy special at my old grade school. The very first stage I ever set foot on is the stage that we're using. We are transforming it into a theater. It is also doubling as a fundraiser for donors' choice programs for the teachers of the school. And teachers of the school get free tickets. So it's a way that we can kind of reward them for risking their lives every day. Or as the Republicans think, teaching kindergartners CRT, because they don't know what that means. We're filming it Saturday, 2 shows, 7:00 and 9:30. Tickets are on my website, and I'm really, really excited about it. The special is about using gallows humor to deal with grief and loss, and that is a subject I think a lot of people can relate to this year.
Especially in this day. I mean, I spent about 8 hours in an ER room here recently, and the number of COVID people in this hospital just through the roof. And talking with some of the nurses and doctors, definitely gallows humor. I mean, I guess that's the only way you get through what they live through every day. And they were like, the majority of the people here are unvaccinated. And you go, how does that message not get out to people? And I talked to one person who was literally hacking out her lungs, saying that she was proud of the fact that she was unvaccinated. I'm like, good for you.
It's interesting that you say, the case numbers were through the roof because the hospitals are so full. That's where they keep half the patients now. It is unreal that people still, and again, it goes back to moving the goalposts. It goes back to the idea of like, well, it's not 100% effective. And it's like, well, we said that from the beginning. It wasn't going to be 100% effective. And they were like, 9 people died from it. And we're like, 800,000 died from COVID. Like, what else do you need? And I remember in the beginning of, I'd say the beginning, but it was probably April of 2020 when I think we had 30,000 deaths. And I had posted something about it. And someone replied saying, oh, not all those deaths are real. Not all those deaths are COVID. And I go, okay, let's argue for a moment. Let's go 10% are real. Let's say only 10%. Would that be fair to you? You think 90% of these are fake. Let's go 10% are real. Okay, that's 3,000. So if we were to get to 300,000, which in your mind would mean 30,000, again, 10%, and I have to teach them how numbers work, but 10% would be what I think we're at today. Would that be a lot to you? And he was like, yeah. So then we were at 500,000. I tagged him again in the comment and I said, is it enough? Oh, I don't think all these are real. I'm like, that's not what I said. How many is enough? Because they keep moving the goalposts. Yeah. And they always will.
I look at one of the folks that I think you've actually done a video on Marjorie Taylor Greene, if I'm not mistaken. She tweeted out not too long ago that 600,000 people die for cancer, and we don't shut the country down for that.
Oh, I mean, apparently we've shut education down. That really is, people talk about, the effect that Rupert Murdoch has had and et cetera. The real thing has been taking funds away from education. That has been the thing that's hurt us more than anything, because the ability to critically think, and not only taking funds away, but the way we teach has always been bizarre. The way that we teach towards standardized testing and the way that we teach the idea of, okay, I'm learning how to say goat in Spanish. That's perfect. Great. How can I use that? Instead, have me talk to someone about something that I can actually use in Spanish. Or instead of focusing on, archaic uses of math, how about we teach people how to give change? Like, how about we teach actual life skills? How about we have ethics classes? How about we have trades classes? And instead, we teach kids things that they don't actually need to know and they don't apply. And I don't care when the train leaves from Detroit. I'm not taking it. Teach me something I need to know.
But I look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the reason I brought up the thing that she said is, when she got thrown off of the education committee, I said this was the dumbest idea that Democrats had. Why would you take the number one reason for increasing education funding off of your committee? Because every day you could turn to and go, we need education funding increases, Exhibit A. And she would be there to say dumb stuff, and you could go, Exhibit A. I don't know why Democrats felt the need to do Republicans' work for them.
Well, I mean, A is unfortunately that's all she can count to. So.
But again, there's all of these characters, and it's just not her. I mean, you did a good mock-up on the other one, Gun Fetish Barbie from Colorado.
Boebert. I call her great value Sarah Palin. But yeah, I did one on Boebert. I did one on Cruz. The scariest thing about Cruz, and I didn't know this until I did that research, is that he's actually one of the smartest people in Congress.
Oh yeah, no, he's probably one of the top debaters. He's a master debater.
It's yes, it is. We've seen the video. The scary thing is that he's doing it purposefully. And I also have one that's coming out shortly on Greg Abbott, where the interesting thing for me is when I do the research on it, you see all these individual things that they do, but when you put them all together, you really get a full picture of who the person is. And with Abbott, the thing I didn't realize about him is just how hypocritical he is.
Yep.
Just, aside from the fact that it's easy to see the hypocrisy when he made $9 million off of getting, horribly injured. I do not want to downplay the fact that he got terribly injured in a way that was unfair, and victims do deserve compensation, but he got $9 million for it, and he's still getting paid more than that every couple of years. But then he limited those same lawsuits to $250,000 for future people.
Isn't that amazing?
And so that's hypocritical right there. But then there's also all the stuff where he talks about personal liberty, except and private businesses doing what they want, and then he wants to force private businesses to play the anthem, or he wants to force private businesses to not have people vaccinated. Like, there are all these other things that he's doing that fly directly in the face of what he says over and over again. And it wasn't until I put them all together that I realized, like, oh, his main thing is being a hypocrite.
No, and one of the things about him that, from the beginning, and I think he was attorney general at the time, or lieutenant governor, years ago, when the West Texas explosion happened, when the fertilizer plant blew up, and they didn't know that there was as much fertilizer there, ammonium nitrate and all that stuff, there in big wooden boxes in a hot Texas sun without a sprinkler system. Who knew that could blow up? But he said, shouldn't we have some kind of regulation? He goes, no, you could just go knock on the door and ask them. And you go, really? I'm going to go knock on the door and say, hey, how much illegal stuff do you got on your property?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that I talk about in the video, the idea that he expects billionaire polluters to use the honor system. Because if there's one group of people that we think will be honorable, it is billionaire polluters. That is it is. I think that if he worked at Arkham Asylum in Gotham, they would be like, it's a little too much. Greg, can you scale it back? It's a little too much.
A little bit.
At least put the mask on.
And this is the sad reality. These are the people who are making our policies, and they're getting away with it because they keep feeding the outrage candy.
Yes.
When you're outraged and you're afraid, you stop thinking, and that's a problem. We've got a good portion of our population not thinking. But Steve, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I wish you the best on the big special this weekend. When do you think it'll be out? When do you think we'll get a look at it?
Well, we'll probably edit it over, January, February, hoping to sell it in March and then have it be ready by the summer. Fingers crossed. And speaking of then, spring and summer is when I'm touring again. And all my tour dates are on my website. I
look forward to it, and I can't wait for you to get back here to Harrisburg on April 8th of next year. Steve, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you much, Rick.
Great talking with you, Steve Hofstetter. Make sure you check out his website, stevehofstetter.com. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that and find out if he's coming to your neck of the woods. Hopefully Chicago, Minneapolis, he might be on your list at some point down the road. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. That was the day that 8 women in Wilmar, Minnesota, stood up for their rights in the workplace. The women worked at the Wilmar Citizens National Bank. These women were paid considerably less than the male employees. The only female bank officer made $4,000 a year less than the men she supervised. Anger over the pay inequity came to a head when the women were told to train a new male hire. He would be their supervisor despite having less experience. He would also make more money. The women went to the bank president, Leo Persh, to discuss the unequal pay. Persh told the women, "We're not all equal, you know." He argued that men needed to be paid more because they paid for dates. For the women, this attitude was the last straw. They filed a complaint with the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. They also formed a union. The Wilmar Bank Employees Association Local 1 became the first bank employees local in Minnesota. Negotiations with the bank went nowhere. The union decided to strike. Both the National Organization for Women and the United Auto Workers supported the strikers. For 2 long years, the strike wore on. The women picketed in the freezing Minnesota winters. They even lost friends over their stand. They became known as the Wilmar 8 and even saw their story turned into a made-for-TV movie by NBC. Despite the national attention, the bank refused to budge. The women ended the strike. Only one of the women went back to work for the bank. but she was demoted from her previous position and did not stay there long. And while the women did bring national attention to the issue of unequal pay, they paid a steep price for their courage. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the reality is, as Steve Hofstetter pointed out, Ted Cruz is a smart guy. I hate the idea, but he was a top-notch debater at Harvard, Yale, one of those. But I do find some of the stupid stuff he says interesting. And today another story came out. Evidently, he he said that in times of crisis, character is revealed. And you go, really? I guess he was on CNBC for about 20 minutes. And he said, in times of crisis, character is revealed. And on the Democratic side, in this time of crisis, we've seen that Democratic politicians are authoritarians. They will control your life. They will order you to obey, and they will destroy you if you don't. This is the guy who, during a moment of crisis, got out of Dodge. So I don't know which. You want somebody who's going to help try and save people's lives, or someone who's going to screw you? I'm the Cancun, baby. I don't know. Here to share some thoughts on the Cruz and other stories of the day, our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at RawStory. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Ho, ho, ho.
I love the Santa outfit. Good on you. What do you think about Cruz? What do you think about this, character, times of crisis?
Well, everything you need to know about Ted Cruz is that he's not just a debater. He is a master debater.
Yeah, I got that in the last segment.
So he, here's the thing about Ted Cruz is the guy will literally say or do absolutely anything if it means that he can turn it over for himself. That is every single ounce of politics. I mean, we saw it with even Donald Trump pointed right to him and was like, this guy is full of it. And we've known that. Yeah. As Democrats for a very long time. The entire Senate has known it from the second they met him. So, I mean, nobody likes him in the Senate. It's sad, really. I can't believe you saw that. Remember the video of his kid, trying to get away when he tried to kiss her? There you go. That's all you need to know.
That is sad. I do get that. But, I lost all respect for him during the debates in 2016. When Trump turned to him and, basically called his wife ugly, that whole thing. I don't know how you then turn around and go, no, that's my guy. Never. That a beating should have come right after that.
It's so lame. He's a pathetic schnoz. I'm amazed that he won that seat. And I don't know necessarily if he had a really good candidate like Beto was again. Especially after all those Republicans have died in Texas, he might not make it. Yeah,
well, let's hope. Let's hope that that's happening. Let's move on. Fox News not happy. They lost their bid to have the lawsuit against them dismissed. The Dominion lawsuit, the $1.6 billion defamation suit, going to go forward. Good ruling in the court.
Yeah, it's obvious that they clearly did exactly what they're being accused of. It's on video. We saw it. We've seen all of these people all over their channels, saying that this was some sort of voter fraud that was caused by Dominion and they're associated with some dictator who died 12 years ago. Or it's really absurd. And there was a lawsuit a couple of years ago where Tucker Carlson said something really stupid and somebody sued him, and in court his lawyers actually said, well, here's the thing, everything that Tucker says is a lie, it's just all crap. We're basically just, he's an entertainer, he's not an actual journalist, he's not really saying anything that is news. And if you're on a channel that has news in the name, I feel like maybe you shouldn't be making stuff up. And I don't know, like that seems like something that should go forward then in court. And I think that's why it's, the court said today, yeah, no, this is moving.
Yeah. But the thing that's interesting is you talk to people on the right who look at Hannity and Ingram and Carlson, the bow tie guy, and they take what they say as God's honest truth, as actual hardcore news. And you go, I don't know, that's really not how you should be taking that. It's BS. It's spin. It's propaganda. It's alternative reality, but not. I mean, you could even say it's comedy without being anywhere near funny. But it's not news.
And the one thing that we learned this week, looking at Mark Meadows' text messages, is that they are absolutely full of crap. This is all an act. None of it is real. This is like wrestling, on TV, when wrestling is fake and is all an act. It's
what?
The exact same thing on Fox News.
Wrestling's not
right?
real?
I know, you're shocked. Shocked, I say. Shocked.
I'm shocked. It's not real. You mean you can't have a 400-pound guy jump 5 feet off the ground right on someone's head and not have his head explode? But here's the weird thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. The very same people who watch wrestling generally are the same people who listen to the BS coming out of Fox News. I don't know. Is there something there?
How is it possible, though, that like everybody knows that wrestling isn't real? Everybody who watches wrestling knows that it's not real. Like, I have a nephew who's like 5, and he knows that wrestling is not real. That doesn't mean he's not gonna like totally body slam the pillow, but it's, and I feel like these people should be applying that same logic to Fox News. The difference is, the wrestling stuff is on a sports channel versus, these guys are on a station, again, that says news in the actual name.
Right.
So if we're going to have just complete crap, then Fox needs to just remove news from its name and admit that they're not reality anymore.
Now, were you surprised that the texts that came from Ingram, Hannity, Carlson to Mark Meadows, the chief of staff of the former guy, are you surprised at that kind of cozy relationship between these 3 propagandists and the administration? Are you surprised by that at all?
Oh, hell no. I mean, that's one of the things that we learned kind of a little bit before the election, is that Hannity was unofficially advising the Trump campaign. Ingram obviously spoke at the RNC convention in 2016. So that doesn't surprise me. What did surprise me, not so much with Hannity, but definitely with Ingram, I did not expect her to actually see the insurrection as bad, or politically damaging. I figured she would be just like, yes, like, where are my Nazi friends? But she was actually texting him and saying, no, this is a bad thing. I expect that from Brian Kilmeade and from Sean Hannity, but never from her. She seemed like she belonged to the militia people.
And it's interesting how everybody, even Dumb Jr., was saying, no, this is bad. We've got to do an address. Even his political instincts were better than everyone advising Trump. Now, what you brought up Ingram. The part that got me is, everybody focused on the last part of her text, which was, he's ruining his legacy. I focused on the middle part where it was, he's ruining us. He's ruining what we've done.
Yeah.
This inclusive we, like she's part of all of this. Like there's this whole, they're all tied together, which they are.
They are. They absolutely are. And they know that they are. And it's out front there. Like, it's completely obvious. It's every time, every once a week, somebody at Fox News gets to have a 20-minute sit down with Donald Trump so he can be on TV for a little bit. And he just sort of bounces from channel to channel. And it's sad. It's really pathetic. But Fox News is basically an extension of the Trump campaign. And even when Trump tried to, go after them for the whole Arizona thing, he can't quit them, like he's just too far in the relationship, and, he needs them as much as they need him. Yeah. It's a very codependent, sad, sick relationship.
But he needs it. In fact, mostly through his presidency. The rumor was, what was being said on Fox News is what he was going to do in the morning. because they were his, like, his kitchen cabinet, only they were on the idiot box there at night. They probably had one in the can while he was, rage tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning. Which I got to tell you, thank you, Jack, for throwing him off, because I don't have to. And generally, I'm not thrilled with censorship or doing that kind of stuff. But life has been so much better without Trump's rage tweets.
Oh my God, right? Like, you don't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning when you have to go to the bathroom and be like, oh God, he said it again, or he did something else again, and know that, like, oh crap, nobody's at work right now. Maybe I should, put my glasses on and turn the lights on and type something about the idiot rage tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Crazy stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. She's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, the website if you want to check that out. If you got a question, comment, something you want to throw at Sarah, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I wanted to get your thoughts on this federal judge's decision today, U.S. District Judge Colleen McMahon, who said that the Sackler case, Purdue Pharma, that the Sackler family, which the settlement, as I understood it, was $4.5 billion settlement. The company was liable. The family was going to get off scot-free. We found out that they had shifted a bunch of money from the company to them, rearranging some furniture, I guess. But the family was going to be held basically liable, free of libel. This judge is saying, no, you didn't file bankruptcy. You're possibly still on the hook. And I say, good. This family should be bankrupt, broke, on a corner with a tin cup begging for pennies.
Absolutely. I lost my brother a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, in April. It'll be 3 years this coming April. God, I can't believe it's been that long. And then right after that, we had the lawsuit began, and we won every single one of them in the state of Oklahoma, but then the Oklahoma Supreme Court overturned the Johnson & Johnson suit. And I don't understand why. It's the exact same lawsuit. It's the same philosophy. And the evidence there was so damaging. Like, they had all of these videos and stuff of the company trying to convince doctors that you should give opioids to children, during spring break when they sprain something. It's just ridiculous.
No,
and the Sacklers were just as bad. So good. It's because they were not smart enough to bail out all of their money into the Cayman account. Good for us. Maybe we can actually fix some of our problems and invest in, different technologies to help fight addiction.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, do you think this is a good decision? Do you think this ends up being something that takes 20 more years in court and nobody ever sees anything? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really hope it doesn't take 20 years in court. I do. If they're probably going to try and appeal as high up as they can. The thing about the Sackler money, though, is it really is going. There's an entire school that they're going to start at Oklahoma State University that will deal specifically with addiction. And a lot of folks don't know that doctors, whenever they go to medical school, they don't even talk about addiction. It's not even an issue that's taught anymore. And so they're really lobbying to try and get that into some of the medical schools, to talk to folks about, this is a problem and what to look for and why you shouldn't just start randomly prescribing stuff. Because it's a serious issue, and we've got to fight this stuff. If we don't, we're going to lose. We've lost how many people this far? We've got 100,000 children over the past 10 years that have lost a parent or guardian. This is awful. It's a serious epidemic, and it's destroying every family in this country. Yeah,
the number that I saw reported was 500,000 people since, I guess, 1999. So you're looking at 500,000 people that, they went to the doctor and the doctor gave them stuff that was going to kill them. And look, I've known people, much like as you have, who, they got hurt at work, something happened, and it's just here. They kept feeding them this stuff, and then one thing led to another, and now they're hooked, and their lives just went straight to pot. And there aren't enough avenues to help. There aren't enough avenues to deal with addiction, and I guess as a society we're so adverse to pain that when they give us this stuff, we take it.
we treat the symptoms, we don't treat the person. And I think that's a big part of it too, is there's a reason why people get addicted to things. There's a reason why people become alcoholics. There's a reason why people, start taking pills. Like my brother bought a hydrocodone in the boys' bathroom whenever he was like 14 years old. That's not normal. That is a psychological issue that needs to be addressed, but we don't do that in this country. We don't focus on mental health issues. We certainly don't give any money towards it anymore. We used to have all of these, amazing mental health facilities all over the country, and all of those got shut down in the 80s because we stopped funding them.
Yeah.
And so now instead we take all of our mentally ill people and we throw them in prison, and now all of our prisons are clogged up, and it's just the same problem. We're just doing it differently and paying twice as much. So I just wish that we could treat this as a larger issue than it actually is, instead of just focusing on one specific, it's the pill.
No, there's a lot of stuff to do. I wanted to get the last question I wanted to get into. Evidently, we've released some new JFK stuff, and there's a bunch of cute kookery going on. Are they still waiting for JFK Jr. to come back in Dallas?
Okay, so yes, they are still waiting for JFK to come back. So, I mean, I was an X-Files fan in high school, and so that has sort of made me this crazy. I have this amazing knowledge of weird conspiracy theories, and I watched that dude with the crazy hair on the History Channel talking about the aliens, and I make a lot of jokes about aliens because it's funny. So when the new JFK documents popped out, I was just like, ooh, JFK, that's another fun conspiracy. Let's read about that. And I found a ridiculous amount of bizarre information. There's a whole bunch of stuff about basically what the FBI and the CIA did is they came in and talked to literally every single criminal in the entire city of Dallas and the surrounding areas. They cast a very big net. There were a lot of people who they were watching who had been in, there was a reporter that they were watching that had been in Moscow who had moved to Paris afterwards. There was a couple of people who were activists who left Cuba and came to the United States. There are people there's some Hollywood producer who was a communist and was making jokes about J. Edgar Hoover being a cocktail kind of man.
So this is all the stuff that they released. We get to read all of this craziness. I can't wait to see it. I know you got a piece on it. I hope folks will take a look at it over at RawStory.com. Just look up Sarah Burris's work. Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next time.
Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Good stuff. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at RawStory.com. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. Right back.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1907. That was the day an explosion rocked Fairmont Coal Company's number 6 and number 8 coal mines in Monaga, West Virginia, killing 367 miners. Newspaper reports estimated the number of dead to be as high as 500. It is considered the worst mine disaster in the history of the United States. Most miners were killed instantly, as the explosion destroyed the mine entrance and its ventilation system. Those not killed instantly suffocated from poisonous gas. Earth tremors were felt 8 miles away. The force of the explosion buckled pavement, collapsed buildings, and derailed streetcars. More than 3,200 miners had died in 1907. There were 3 more mine disasters before the end of the year. The last month became known as Black December. In January, a coroner's jury verdict ruled that a blowout shot ignited coal dust and made a number of recommendations for safer practices. But David McAteer tells a different story in his history of the disaster. He argues that the tipple had a design flaw that led to occasional coal car derailments as they exited the mine. And on this day, there had been a derailment with coal cars crashing at the bottom of the shaft and taking out the electrical and ventilation systems with it, igniting the coal dust in the process. The disaster generated a surge in demands for greater mine safety, leading to the creation of the Bureau of Mines in 1910. The Bureau could conduct research and safety training, but were powerless to conduct inspections or safety enforcement. Miners would continue to fight for the better part of the century for safety regulations and enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Your thoughts, questions, comments. Do you find it interesting that the Republican Party, the RNC, that they've agreed to pay $1.6 million in legal fees for the former guy? Are you surprised by that? I kind of am. I'm kind of surprised that the Republican Party is raising funds to be able to fund the former guy's lawsuits. I think it's kind of ridiculous. I know if the Democrats did it, boy, the Republicans would be losing their minds. But hey, here we are. Here we are. They're going to help because evidently, some of the stuff going on in New York, I guess he's broke. And this is one of those weird things where you go, hold on a second. Isn't he a multi-billionaire? And isn't like $1.6 million to a multi-billionaire kind of like, I don't know, cushion money? Isn't this something that he could fund on his own? Now, last month, the Republican Party said in their campaign finance filings that it had paid $121,670 in October alone for Trump's personal attorney. More of those payments have been made since then. An RNC spokesperson said that they paid in November $578,000 to attorneys that I guess the way they've laid it out represent Trump and his businesses. So it's gone beyond just the former guy. The Republican Party is now defending the businesses. And I'm going, you know what? Good on them. The more money that they spend defending the former guy in court, the more money they waste on lawyers, the more of that they do, the less money they're going to have sinking into candidates who could, quite frankly, be crazier and worse than the former guy himself. So good on them. Also some good news. The former CEO of McDonald's, this Steve Easterbrook, evidently, he has agreed to pay $105 million back to McDonald's because he had a nice golden parachute when they let him go. I guess it was back in 2019 that he was fired. Evidently, he was having some extra, I don't know, some extra training sessions with an employee. Let's put it that way. He had an extra, some special time with an employee, and that was a violation of the contract. So when they fired him, he got the golden parachute. Well, turns out it's even worse than that. So he has agreed to give some of that money back, because the way I'm getting this is, I guess the bailout was there for him because he had claimed that it was a non-physical relationship, and that that was the only thing that he violated. Turns out, no, that's wrong. So hey, I love it when these CEOs, they end up getting a little comeuppance. I hate seeing these guys get these massive bailouts for doing horrible things, because it never happens to working people. Every time I've ever been fired, and I've been fired quite a few times over my lifetime, it's always been, there's the door, get out. It's never been going, there's the door, and here, oh, by the way, here's a boatload of money. I know you're going to have problems on the other side of this, and we just want to help. I've never had that. Never had that. But our CEO class, they always seem to have it. You know why? And you're going to get tired of hearing this. It's because they have contracts. And as long as they don't abuse their contracts and violate them in the most egregious ways, like, I don't know, diddling around with an employee under your charge, they always have a parachute. Now I look at my favorite CEO, and do you have one? We should all have one, because hey, we work for less wages so that they can be our corporate titans. But the guy who was the head of Home Depot years and years ago, Robert Nardelli was his name. When they fired him, they gave him $210 million. And within a couple of months, he was the CEO, I think, of Chrysler, where he got hundreds of millions more. I wish I could get fired in a way like that. How come that never happens to me? Just amazing stuff. We now find out, however, the treason caucus, the texts that were sent out, and this is one of those things that just goes, Mark Meadows was doing some work with the January 6th subcommittee, or the select committee, gave them some texts, and the names haven't been released. The reason we know Jim Jordan is because Jim Jordan and the Federalist Society kind of outed him. But we know that some of the other ones are going to be Gun Fetish Barbie, Lauren Boebert, Andy Biggs, or Mo Brooks. We know that these people are going to be somewhere. Madison Cawthorn's got to be somewhere in there. Although I don't know about Madison Cawthorn. I don't think that even they respect him enough to take his texts. Just kind of a thought. But Gohmert and Gosar and Marjorie Trader Green, I'm sure they're all somewhere in this. And my congressman, Scott Perry, that he is going to be somewhere in this. And I want to know who those texts were from. They need to be made public. Because ultimately, all of this stuff should be made public. All of this information should be put out on the table. Because here's the thing. I keep having conservatives hit me up, well, this is all a witch hunt and, it's a sham, basically regurgitating the Sean Hannity lines. Interestingly enough, though, even Sean Hannity on the day that this was happening saying this is bad, while from the 11 months since has been doing nothing but cheerleading, diminishing, and trying to spin it in no, Patriotic Day. Oh, Patriotic Day. No, not a Patriotic Day. It was an insurrection. It was a violent insurrection. It was planned. And we now, as more stuff keep coming out, we now know what the game plan was. And at the time, we were talking about the stuff that we're now finding out that was actually factual. And the thing is, Trump didn't have a problem saying it. That's the part that gets me. He was here in Pennsylvania, had a big rally in Allentown, where, he was at that rally talking about if we can just get the states to decide, because Congress, we've got the 26 state houses across the country, and we could win the presidency by going this other route. And I remember going, this is the game plan. Set aside all the votes, set aside all the electors, and pick and choose where they think they can win. And they were telling us, they were delivering the message to us. A lot of people weren't listening. And now we see in writing, on a PowerPoint presentation, with nothing but lies and deceit and misrepresentations, they have then come out with the big lie of they can do this. And there's no way they would get away with this, or would they? Now, I'm surprised, again, those folks who walked around during the Tea Party era with their pocket constitutions, waving them at us, like somehow that just appeared. I guess they didn't read them. Because I don't hear a peep. Not a peep from any of them. And that's kind of the frustrating part of this. And I think every one of these people's phone records should be public display. I think they should be public record. You are a representative of we the people. Your privacy rights should come second to the job that you do for us, the power that we give you, the ability to make law, the ability to do the kind of stuff that they were talking about trying to get away with. All of this stuff should be a matter of public record. I don't care if you're Gun Fetish Barbie or Marjorie Trader Green or Scott Perry. And every one of those people should come forward and go, you know what? You don't need to subpoena it. Here it is. Because here's the important point of this. If you truly believed what you were doing was right, if you truly believe that this was something you could legally do, own it. Be responsible. That's what I teach my children. If you do something and you believe you're right, you stand up and you fight for yourself. I guess they ultimately know that they weren't right. And that's the part that's interesting, that they are, well, they're hiding. And they're trying to get us to believe that this is some kind of massive overreach, that we should be able to see Lauren Boebert's phone records, who she texted, what she texted. Was she on the list of people who were briefed on this treason PowerPoint? Now, the January 6th committee has also subpoenaed the phone records of Brad Parscale. Brad was the former campaign manager of Donald Trump. You remember him? Big guy. Police, had to slam him to the ground and beat him up, rough him up a little bit because he was beating up on his wife, I guess. That was, as I remember, that was what they were. There was some domestic violence stuff which brought the police out there, and there was all that. But he says that he wasn't involved. He had nothing to hide, although he didn't answer whether he was going to testify or not. We'll see. Again, all of these people should be trying to clear their name because we're in a moment, interestingly enough, we're in a moment of history. We are living history. In 100 years, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic by saying this, in 100 years, scholars are going to look back at this moment and say, who did what and when? How did we react in this moment of crisis? Who were the people who stepped up? Who were the people who ran and hid? Who were the people who tried to cover their tracks? And who were the people who were the true believers? History will remember this, because I believe if this goes unpunished, if the former guy and all of his ilk, if they go unpunished, 2024, they're back in power. And if that's the case, they whitewash all this. And then we move into some really, really scary, freaky times in this country because, well, are we a democracy anymore? So for me, Democrats had better do something. They better do it soon. And that's not just on the January 6th stuff. I don't want them rushing the judgment, but they can step this up a little bit. We need to have the transparency of all of this stuff. I want to know the answers to everything. I have conservatives who go, well, you just want to know this or that. No. I want to know it all. And I ask my conservative friends, what is it that you want to know about that day? Well, I want to know, why the National Guard wasn't there. Well, I think we're starting to get a pretty good picture of why the National Guard wasn't there, because they were waiting for Antifa to show up, and Antifa never showed up. They were waiting to protect the Trump supporters from the dreaded Antifa that didn't show up. And look, the plan was they wanted Antifa. They needed them. They needed the chaos. They needed the clashing in the streets. They needed the violence so they could declare martial law, bring in the National Guards and crush some heads, show those bums how to put down the iron fist of the law. But nobody showed up. And how do you have a civil war if nobody shows up? How do you crush the enemy if they don't bother showing up and doing what you need them to do to justify it? And what's interesting is you listen to Fox News on the day, they were saying, Antifa was going into the Capitol. Laura Ingraham was, look at them with their black helmets and their backpacks. Yeah, those were the Proud Boys and all the white supremacist groups who had been wargaming this. And we're now seeing all of this stuff being written out. This was all planned. And the more that keeps coming out, and look, there's more. There's a lot more. The more that keeps coming out, the more damning this is going to be. But here's the problem. The problem is if you don't hold them accountable now and you lose the next election, there is going to be another January 6th commission. You are going to get the Max Millers of the world, who's probably going to win Gonzalez's seat in Ohio who has said we're going to do away with this commission, and they're going to bring in something else that is going to make it and overwrite it and make it the most patriotic day ever with flowers and roses and happiness and parades with children waving, and it's going to be phenomenal. History will be whitewashed, and it will be phenomenal for your fascists. And this is the sad reality of where we are. So all of the other things, that we hope for and want and need, all that stuff comes second. This is where Democrats had better get their heads out of whatever orifice they've stuck it in and start doing something on voting rights. And even then, I don't know that it's happening fast enough. I was saying this at the beginning. Voting rights should be pushing that through right away. So we stop some of the stuff that's going into place, and then we can get it through the courts fast enough to make sure that it stands up to judicial muster. That if we do nothing, at least return to the Voting Rights Act, at least return to the Supreme Court decision in the Shelby decision. At least have some preclearance, at least have something in place where somebody's watching and where there are consequences for all the shenanigans that we've seen, especially in Republican southern states. And look, Pennsylvania's trying. They're trying to do all the things. And if it weren't for Governor Tom Wolf, they would be doing all of the things that are happening in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and elsewhere. Because they want it. It's here in our legislature. It's passing. This idea that they can go back, and this should be free. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. And where are my all of my pocket Constitution flag waving Tea Party twits? They want to be able to go back and decertify an election because they can. They want to be able to have the ultimate say. Because this is the original intent of the Constitution, don't you know, Rick? They want to throw your vote, my vote, out. Now, look, are there some valid claims that we have some things that we could do better in our voting? Yeah. I'm someone who believes that we have hand-marked paper ballots. I say we mark them by hand, we put them in a box, and you count them by hand. And if it takes a week to get the results, so be it. I don't want voting machines, never have. But if we have to use them, the ones that have a paper trail are preferable to no paper trail. And the fact that there was ever a time where we didn't have a paper trail is insane to me. But to Republicans right now, it doesn't matter. Voting doesn't matter to them because they've got power. And the way they're gerrymandering up the states, we should all be afraid. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back with our good friend Congressman Bob Ney. Stick around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1951. That was the day New York City was struck by the Great Bagel Famine. 300 members across 32 bakeries of the Bagel Bakers of America Local 338 walked off the job over wages and working conditions. Morris Siegel, business agent for the local, stated that the Bakers Association had been lax in living up to the welfare fund payments and sanitary provisions of the contract. The Bagel Bakers produced 1.2 million bagels weekly for New York City consumers. The Wisconsin Jewish Chronicle noted, quote, "The only ones welcoming this respite are the salmon. Diners, delicatessens, and Teamster delivery drivers were all rocked by the strike, which lasted for 6 weeks. The two sides were so deadlocked that a mediator who had effectively settled a smoked salmon dispute 3 years earlier was brought in to help settle the conflict. The Bagel Bakers won a $3 a day wage increase and were ready to return to work. But the Teamsters would not begin deliveries until they were paid for lost wages due to the lack of deliveries made during the strike. The Bagel Bakers would engage in job actions effectively over the course of the next 15 years until they, too, suffered the fate of many an industrial worker, that of automation. Their labor would eventually be replaced by labor-saving bagel-making machines by the late 1960s.
The Bagel Bakers Local 338 was a union that was based in New York State. And they set the minimum wages of the Yiddish bagel bakeries and controlled all of the stages from the flour sack to the plate. But like the railroad did to the canal.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm still thinking about this. This court decision with the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. And look, I've said from the beginning they should be wiped out immediately for the things that they did. They should have nothing left. And the fact that this settlement for $4.5 billion would have shielded them, the family, from any of this, I think is just flat wrong. And that the bankruptcy court would allow this to happen, to me, is just, especially when you look at the fact that 500,000 people died, and those are just the ones that they've officially labeled having died because of this. We got to hold some of these people responsible and criminally responsible. Like the guy who said, if they're going to eat them, they're going to eat them like Doritos. We're going to make them. Yeah, I'm sorry. The guy who said, yeah, we know they're addicted. These people should be held accountable. Just my thought. And here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, maybe even this one. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So I'm looking at this. This decision by this judge, and I think it's a good one. I think we throw this out. I think you open it up to more lawsuits, make families whole, and if the only way we can do that, because we can't bring people back, the only way we can do that is to sue these people into bankruptcy, then that's what we got to do.
Well, I think it's a great decision. I hope it holds. I know it'll go through a court system now, but it's a $4.5 billion settlement that legally shielded the members of the Sackler family, and this will turn this on its head, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I only hope that the Sackler family gets every single thing they deserve for this and for what they've done to people, knowingly done to people in this country. I mean, this epidemic, we want to talk about a pandemic, but this epidemic of opioids and drug and alcohol overdoses, by the way, 195,000 a year if you combine drug and alcohol. But the opioid crisis is terrible. I sponsor people in addiction, and right now, Rick, I would say that it's becoming about probably 60% of the people I sponsor have more of an opioid addiction than they do in alcohol.
Oh, because this stuff is, it's from what I understand, it's one of those things you take once or twice. It begins changing the chemical imbalance in your body. And look, when I had my hip done, they were constantly trying to push the Oxycontin on me, and I'm like, no, I'm okay, good, thanks.
Well, a lot of the people that I support in recovery programs are not people who just all of a sudden decided to, abuse opioids. A lot of the people are people who were given opioids for a certain reason, and a lot of times, Rick, an unbelievable amount of opioids. And then it started, and then eventually to get them illegally on the street because they were addicted was too much money. Then they went to the cheap version of an opioid, which is heroin, and we know where, that path leads them. And also the amount of lack of education on this issue. I listened to your last guest. She was great. She pointed out something you rarely, ever hear about, ever. She pointed out that, addiction and alcohol and substance abuse training in medical schools is, it's starting, but it's basically been non-existent. I think it was 2 weeks of a course that they were having maybe in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we need to be investing in and moving forward on. And like she's told me that before, and it's something that I never thought of. That's here you have these doctors who are prescribing stuff that can be horribly addictive, and you're giving it to people who might be addicted to something else.
Well, that's correct. And then also there's a built-in penalty system. I'll call it a fear system, too, within the hospital systems. If you and I go in and we go in the emergency room and the doctor does a blood test and says, hey, Bob, you have high sugar, you're reeling into the realm of being a diabetic, here's what you've got to do. If I go in and the doctor suspects some type of addiction. They don't do a drug test, but they suspect addiction, alcohol or drug addiction, and they confront me. Guess what? I can go turn them in for unfounded accusations. So
that sounds
it's
stupid.
A whole different world, and then they get penalized within the point and bonus system.
Well, isn't this where we got to figure out how to change that kind of stuff? And look, Sarah is someone who I sympathize with. She lost her brother 3 years ago to this, and the story's horrible. I mean, he got hurt in an accident, and just started off innocently enough, going to the doctor. Here's this, and then got hooked on it, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And it was a multi-year struggle, which you hear time and time again. And there were no avenues for help. There were no places to get treatment. It was just all an uphill climb that it shouldn't have to be.
Right. If we're in an accident and we're in grave condition and they take us into an emergency room and they life flight us, they might spend upwards of $1 million to try to save our lives, correct? Because we've been in an accident. But if somebody comes in and they have an addiction, if they don't have insurance, if the recovery center doesn't take Medicaid, if they're on Medicaid, good luck. Good luck. But come in an automobile accident, then maybe you can get some treatment.
Yeah. But isn't the argument that for this case, and I remember the Johnson & Johnson settlement and all of this stuff, that I guess the Johnson & Johnson one was also set aside. But wasn't the argument we were going to take that money, we're going to set this stuff up? You weren't actually going to make the families whole, but we were going to create that kind of infrastructure. Wasn't that part of the argument?
Well, yes, and a lot of families, and again, I've dealt with countless people over the last 15 years and their families, and the chaos and the destruction that's done over all of this. And again, it's not just people who decided to take a drug. A lot of people were given these opioids, and they want help. They seek treatment, which is what's needed. And again, the monies should have went into treatment to provide treatment for people. And in a lot of cases, they simply didn't. And so the families aren't out there after, give me a cash value for this. A lot of the families would like treatment for their loved ones while they're alive, not some type of compensation after they're dead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm, like I said, I'm glad to see this happen. Let's move along. Wanted to get your thoughts on the evidently the Build Back Better plan is done for now. Evidently, the Senate parliamentarian has thrown out, I guess, an immigration portion of that. Your thoughts?
Well, I saw the president's comments on it. I thought his comments were, very decent comments about, trying to pick this up and go with it. I know within the Senate Democratic circles, there's two schools of thought developing. One of, what do you do, with or to Manchin, and then the other is the Schumer approach, which is trying to get, Manchin aboard, because people say, why do you keep mentioning Manchin? Well, it's because he's the 50th vote.
Yep.
That's why. If there were 51 votes, you and I would not even be saying the word Manchin.
We'd still be talking about cinema.
Yes, we would. So, right now it's on ice for now. I think you and I have been talking for quite a few weeks about the fact it wasn't going to make it for Christmas anyway. I know there were hopes and expectations, and now we're going into the first of the year. I would say, though, and I think, didn't you pick March? I picked May. If they don't do something by that period of time, I think we compromised on April.
Yep.
They're going to be out of luck for the year. They've got to move on something, I think, in January.
Yeah. Do you see anything on the voting rights stuff? Do you see anything getting done on that?
Well, that's the other thing. If we look at the let's look at the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I know there's two different pieces of legislation, but the Supreme Court gutted the requirements. I think it was in 2013, and that gave the green light to go ahead and do whatever you wanted to the Voting Rights Act. The political system. And people have taken advantage of that. And I think if you look at the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, he was on the first one, by the way. He passed the original VRA into law. And I think that if they would do this, it would just be, quite amazing. It would set, some standards on the federal level of where people could go if they are intending to gut the Voting Rights Act, where they have to go through the system first. So I would make it a priority, I would think. And I think there is a chance, to get that. I do. I think there's a chance to get the Voting Rights Act.
Or at least the one that Joe Manchin dreamt up that he seemed to believe 10 Republicans would come along on, but oddly enough, none of them did.
Right, correct. But I still think, didn't he also lean towards, he leaned towards John Lewis's
He leaned
bill,
into some of that. He leaned away from some of the early voting stuff and some of the quote unquote more liberal stuff. But there was still some good things in what he had, and still didn't get any Republican votes.
Right. I mean, if they can just get some of the basics where it sets the Fed, to be able to look at the whole procedure, that will help to stop the immediate gutting that's been occurring since 2013.
But what's to stop the court to then overturn that law, like they did with the in the Shelby decision?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, who knows what they'll do?
Yeah, but you got to get something, or
they've got to try
end
to
of the
do
road.
Something. Right.
Another case in front of the courts actually went the right way. I think Fox News sought to get their $1.6 billion suit against them from Dominion Voting Systems. They tried to get that tossed out, and the judge said, nope, not tossing it.
Right. The judge in Delaware found that Fox News, that what they had covered of the election fraud, I think during and after the election, has been inaccurate. And so that allows this major case to start to, continue to move on. And the case was declined to be dismissed by the judge. So now this allows Dominion Voting to unearth, communications within Fox, which should be, I think, quite fascinating. We've been talking about the members of Congress and their communications on January 6th. I think it would be fascinating now for Dominion, which, I don't blame Dominion. They're rolling full steam ahead. Go ahead and unearth what the Fox News commentators and the Fox News system was saying about proceeding on this. I mean, wouldn't it be something if there's an email out there that says, yeah, we know it's not accurate, but we're going to make money off of it?
Yeah, well, wasn't it Les Moonves who came out and said, yeah, Trump's bad for democracy, but he's good for our bottom line?
Exactly.
You get one of those, one of those emails that, we know it's all a big lie, but we're going to keep pushing it anyway because it's good for ratings. It keeps the outrage candy fed into the minions. It keeps the people who bought the T-shirt all riled up. I think that's out there somewhere. I look at Laura Ingram's tweet, a text to Mark Meadows. To me, that's a smoking gun right there. Everyone's focusing on what Trump's doing to his legacy. I look at that middle part. He's taken down everything that we've built. What do you mean we? You shouldn't be part of this administration. And that basically just saying she knows she's part of the propaganda arm of that administration.
Oh, it was mending together the White House and a corporate media source.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the technical definition of fascism? The melding of corporate and government into one, the bundle of sticks?
It beat the Vulcan mind meld.
There you go. Last thought I wanted to get from you. Evidently today, another subpoena by the January 6th Commission. This time they've subpoenaed this retired Army Colonel Phil Waldron, the guy who wrote the memo. Do you think he testifies?
Yeah, I mean, I think he might. Let's see if the Justice Department now continues down the path, for example, against Meadows as it did Bannon. It may not stop Bannon because he has all these resources, in Meadows. But on the case of the military, guy that they're trying to get there, it may exactly do what they want to do, which is to, have him testify. That may in itself work.
Now, see, I'm waiting for the person, and I've been talking about this most of the night. I'm waiting for that person, and I think this could be the guy. Career military guy. Someone
Right.
honor is, high on their list of importance. I'm waiting for the guy to come out and say, yeah, I wrote this PowerPoint and I stand by every bit of it and walk through and take ownership of it and say, yeah, I briefed these people and this is what we should have done, and really go, yeah, this was the plan. This is what should have been done, and it wasn't wrong. I want that guy to come forth.
And he may be the very person to do it. And again, the precedent setting going after Bannon, and he may take a look at that. But I agree with you, too, on the psyche of the military guy. I did what I thought was right. Yes, sure, I did.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth.
Right, exactly.
I want that moment.
It was good.
There we go. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. Great insight, my friend.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, look, I'm waiting for that moment. I'm waiting for that Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth. You're damn right I wrote the treason memo, and I'd write it again. And again and again and again. I would love to see that. Because look, here's a guy who was just in Louisiana not too long ago, still spewing the big lie. Still saying that their system is screwed up, that there's all the fake ballots, the fake counts, the all of the vulnerabilities, all of that stuff. Still spreading it, even though the reality, audit after audit, investigation after investigation, shows nothing. Nothing. None of the claims, none of the things that Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood, and none of them. None of the big lie that Fox News kept perpetrating. None of it was at reality. It was all the spin. It was all the ground cover for going down the path of the memo, of going down the path of the PowerPoint, and getting the ability to throw out the electors and go to the congressional vote. That's all it was about. Now, as I've said, voting rights should be something we take a look at very closely, because in this society, in a society of self-governance, the ballot box is sacrosanct. If you can't trust the results out of that ballot box, you don't have a democracy. You've got problems. But lots of that to get to, and I'm hoping he does. I'm hoping the guy. I would love to hear him say, "You can't handle the truth." That would be perfect. Somebody should be putting money down on that. Just my thought. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, doing the Facebooks, YouTube. Subscribe, comment, share, all of that. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
In a world that's clogged and choking with a massive overdose of plastic trash, you'll be heartened to learn that governments and industries are teaming up to respond forcefully to this planetary crisis. Unfortunately, their response has been to engage in a global race to make more plastic stuff and to force poor countries to become dumping grounds for plastic garbage. Leading this Kafkaesque greed fest are such infamous plunderers and polluters as ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and other petrochemical profiteers. With fossil fuel profits crashing, the giants are rushing to convert more of their oversupply of oil into plastic. But where to send the monstrous volumes of waste that will result? The industry's chief lobbyist outfit, the American Chemistry Council, looked around last year and suddenly shouted, "Eureka! There's Africa!" In particular, they're targeting Kenya to become a plastics hub for global trade in waste. However, Kenyans have an influential community of environmental activists who've enacted some of the world's toughest bans on plastic pollution. To bypass this inconvenient local opposition, the dumpers are resorting to an old corporate power play, free trade. Their lobbyists are pushing an autocratic trade agreement that would ban Kenyan officials from passing their own laws or rules that interfere with trade in plastic waste. Trying to hide their ugliness, the plastic profiteers created a PR front group called Alliance to End Public Waste. But hello, it's not public waste. Exxon and other funders of the Alliance make, promote, and profit from the mountains of destructive trash they now demand we clean up. This is Jim Hightower saying the real problem is not waste, but plastic itself. Rather than subsidizing more of the stuff, we should seek out and encourage people who are developing real solutions and alternatives.